My brother mocked me. Where's your wife and kids? Oh, right, you don't have any. My parents also joined him in mocking me. So I said, where's your money? Oh, right, I've been supporting you, but it was until today only. I, 35M, never imagined that Thanksgiving dinner would be the day I finally snapped. But when my brother sat across from me with that smug grin, making jokes about my empty house while mom and dad laughed along, something inside me just broke. And what came next changed everything. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. While my brother coasted through life on charm and empty promises, I buried myself in books and later in work. Our parents never hid their favoritism. He was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, even when he was doing everything wrong. I was just the backup plan, the reliable one who'd always be there to clean up the mess. After college, I landed a decent job in finance. Nothing glamorous, but it paid well. My brother tried his hand at various ventures, each one failing more spectacularly than the last. First, it was the food truck that lasted 3 months. Then the crypto investment scheme that wiped out his savings. After that came the failed online boutique, the abandoned real estate license, and most recently, some pyramid scheme disguised as a wellness company. Through it all, our parents stood by him. They believed in his potential, they said. He just needed time to find himself. Meanwhile, I climbed the corporate ladder, saved aggressively, and invested wisely. By my early 30s, I had built a comfortable life for myself. The financial support started small. Dad needed help with a medical bill about 7 years ago. $5,000. I sent it without hesitation. Then mom's car broke down. $3,000 for repairs. My brother needed rent money, just this once. $2,000. It was always just this once, always an emergency, always temporary. The requests became more frequent. Dad's medication costs kept rising. Mom needed dental work. My brother's latest business idea needed seed money. I kept a spreadsheet, not because I planned to collect, but because I needed to see the numbers to believe them myself. Over 7 years, the total crept past $250,000. Not once did anyone say thank you. Not really. There were perfunctory acknowledgments, quick texts saying they got the transfer, but never gratitude. It was expected. I was the successful one, the one without a family to support, so obviously I should help out. That's what they told themselves, and I let them believe it. The relationship topic was always sore. I dated occasionally, but work consumed most of my time. I was focused on building security, on creating something stable. My brother, meanwhile, got married at 25 to a woman he barely knew. They had 2 kids by the time he was 28. The marriage was rocky, constantly on the verge of collapse, held together by my parents' babysitting and my money, though they didn't know about the latter part. Every family gathering became a reminder of what I lacked. My brother's kids would run around while mom and dad cooed over them. I'd sit there, the successful uncle with the empty house, wondering why my achievements never seemed to matter. The jokes started subtly. Little comments about me being married to my job. Questions about when I'd settle down, asked with just enough edge to sting. This Thanksgiving was supposed to be different. I'd been seeing someone, a woman I met through a friend. It was early, only 3 months in, but it felt right. She couldn't make it to Thanksgiving because she was visiting her own family across the country, but her existence gave me a shield, however thin. I arrived at my parents' house with an expensive wine and a sense of dread I couldn't shake. My brother's car was already in the driveway, beat up and held together by duct tape and prayer. I'd paid for repairs on that thing at least 4 times. Dinner started normally enough. Dad carved the turkey while mom fussed over the side dishes. My brother's wife looked exhausted, trying to manage their 2 kids who were bouncing off the walls. I helped where I could, setting the table, pouring drinks, playing the role I always played. We sat down to eat, and that's when my brother started. He asked about my life, my work, the usual surface-level questions. Then he pivoted, asking if I was seeing anyone. I mentioned her briefly, keeping details vague. He nodded along, that familiar smirk forming on his lips. Then he said it. He asked where my wife and kids were, pausing for effect before answering his own question. Oh right, I didn't have any. He laughed like he'd told the funniest joke in the world. The table went quiet for a moment, then mom chuckled. She said something about me being too picky, too focused on work. Dad joined in, saying I needed to get my priorities straight before it was too late. My brother fed off their energy, encouraged. He made another comment about how at least he'd figured out what mattered in life. gesturing to his kids, who were currently throwing mashed potatoes at each other. I felt my jaw tighten. My hands gripped my fork until my knuckles went white. They kept going, trading jokes and observations about my single life, my empty house, my apparently meaningless existence. My brother's wife looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. The kids continued their chaos, oblivious. Something in me calculated the moment with cold precision. Every dinner I'd paid for through their mortgage. Every Christmas gift I'd funded through their credit cards. Every laugh at my expense, subsidized by my wire transfers. The spreadsheet flashed through my mind. Every entry, every date, every amount. I set down my fork carefully and looked directly at my brother. My voice came out calm, almost cheerful, matching his tone exactly. I asked him where his money was, pausing just like he had. Oh right, I'd been supporting him, but only until today. The room went silent. Actually silent this time. Even the kids stopped mid-throw, sensing the shift in atmosphere. My brother's face went from smug to confused to red in about 3 seconds. He asked what I was talking about. I turned to my parents. I asked them the same question. Where was their money? Oh right, same answer. I'd been supporting them too. Past tense. Was. Mom started to say something, but I held up my hand. I wasn't yelling, wasn't angry. I was perfectly calm as I laid it out. 7 years. $253,000 and change. Medical bills, car repairs, mortgage payments, credit card debts, business ventures, groceries, utilities, insurance premiums, and countless emergency requests. I kept track of everything. Dad's face went pale. He insisted those were gifts that I'd offered. I nodded and agreed. They absolutely were gifts. And now the gifts were stopping. Effective immediately. My brother found his voice, sputtering that I was being dramatic, that this was family. Family helps family. I smiled at that and pointed out that funny how family only went one direction. I asked when was the last time any of them had asked how I was doing. Really asked. Not as a prelude to a request, but because they actually cared. The silence stretched. My brother's wife grabbed the kids and took them to another room. Smart woman. Mom tried a different approach. She reminded me they were my parents, that they'd raised me, that I owed them. I considered this and acknowledged that yes, they raised me. They also raised him, I said, gesturing to my brother. Yet somehow only one of us was expected to pay that debt for the rest of my life. My brother stood up, getting defensive now. He said I was throwing money in their faces, being cruel. I stood too, still calm. I explained I wasn't throwing anything. I was simply matching their energy. They'd spent years making me feel less than because I didn't have a wife and kids. Meanwhile, I'd spent years making sure they all had roofs over their heads and food on their tables. Dad finally spoke up, asking what I wanted from them. An apology? I thought about that. An apology would be nice, I admitted, but that wasn't really the point anymore. The point was respect. The point was recognition that my life had value even without checking the traditional boxes. The point was that I was done being the ATM they made fun of. I left that night without eating another bite. I drove home to my empty house, my quiet space, and felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages. I ignored them all while I had my coffee. Over the next few days, the messages evolved. At first they were angry, accusing me of abandoning family over a joke. Then they shifted to bargaining, promising to be better, to appreciate me more. Finally came the panic, when they realized I was serious. My brother's rent was due. Without my backstop, he couldn't cover it. Mom's medication refill came up, and Dad's pension didn't stretch far enough. The credit cards I'd been quietly paying off suddenly demanded attention. Reality hit them fast and hard. I didn't gloat. I didn't respond to most of the messages. I simply existed in my space, doing my work, seeing the woman I'd been dating, rediscovering what it felt like to spend my money on myself. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my brother showed up at my office. Security called to ask if I'd see him, and I said yes. He looked rough, tired, humbled. We sat in a conference room, and he apologized. Really apologized. He admitted he'd taken me for granted, that they all had. He said he didn't realize how much I'd been carrying until the weight was suddenly on his shoulders. I appreciated the apology, but told him it didn't change anything. He needed to figure out his own life. He was 40 years old with 2 kids and no savings. That was a problem, but it wasn't my problem anymore. He left looking smaller than when he arrived. Mom called the following week, actually called instead of texted. She cried. Said she was sorry for laughing, sorry for not defending me, sorry for treating me like a wallet. I listened. I told her I loved her, but I needed space. She had to learn to manage within their actual means, not the inflated lifestyle my money had provided. Dad was the holdout. He didn't apologize for weeks. When he finally did, it was stiff, awkward, clearly something Mom had forced. I accepted it anyway because that was probably the best he could do. Update 1. It's been 3 months since Thanksgiving, and I thought I should update because things have developed in ways I didn't expect. My brother lost his apartment. I found out through Mom, who called me crying, begging me to help just this once. I held firm. He ended up moving his family into my parents' house, which created exactly the chaos you'd imagine. 2 adults, 2 kids, and 2 senior citizens in a 3-bedroom house. The irony wasn't lost on me that the house I'd been helping pay the mortgage on was now sheltering the brother who'd mocked me. The woman I'd been seeing, I told her everything one night over dinner. I expected judgment, maybe criticism for cutting off my family. Instead, she looked at me with something like respect and said it was about time I stood up for myself. We've gotten more serious since then. She's met my friends, I've met hers, and we're building something real. Something that's mine, not something I'm funding for someone else. My parents had to make real changes. Dad picked up a part-time job at a hardware store, something he swore he'd never do at his age. Mom started clipping coupons, actually budgeting, shopping at discount stores instead of the organic markets she'd grown accustomed to. They sold Dad's vintage car collection, the one he'd spent my money maintaining. Watching them adapt to reality has been strange. Part of me feels guilty. Most of me feels vindicated. My brother's wife left him. I didn't see that coming. But apparently the stress of their new living situation, combined with the financial reality check, was the final straw for their already struggling marriage. She took the kids and moved in with her sister. My brother blamed me at first, sent me a long, rambling text about how I destroyed his family. I didn't respond. But then something shifted. He got a job. A real job, not another get-rich-quick scheme. He's working in sales at an electronics store. The pay isn't great, but it's steady. He's been there for 6 weeks now, which is longer than he's stuck with anything in the past decade. He's fighting for custody, trying to prove he can be stable. I heard this all secondhand through Mom, who's taken to giving me weekly updates whether I ask for them or not. The family dynamic has completely changed. My cousins and extended family heard about what happened, twisted through the grapevine into various versions of the truth. Some of them reached out to tell me I was right, that they'd noticed the favoritism for years. Others haven't spoken to me since, viewing me as the villain who abandoned his struggling family. I'm okay with both reactions. Update 2. 6 months out now, and I'm writing this from a completely different place mentally and physically. I moved. Not far, but into a bigger place, a house actually. It felt like the right time to invest in myself, in my future. The woman I've been seeing, we decided to move in together. It's the first time I've lived with a partner, and it's terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. My parents have stabilized. They're managing on their actual income, which required downsizing their lifestyle significantly, but hasn't killed them like they initially claimed it would. Dad's part-time job became full-time when they needed someone to manage inventory. He complains about it constantly, but also seems to have a sense of purpose he lacked before. Mom started a small side business doing alterations and tailoring, something she'd always been good at but never pursued because, well, she didn't need to. My brother and I had coffee last week. First time we'd spoken face-to-face since he came to my office. He initiated it, asked if we could talk. I almost said no, but curiosity won. He looked different, leaner, harder somehow. Work and responsibility had aged him, but in a way that seemed right. He told me he'd been going to therapy, dealing with a lot of issues around entitlement and arrested development. His words, not mine. He said something that stuck with me. He admitted that I'd been enabling him for years, and he'd let me. He said the cruelest thing I ever did for him was also the kindest. Cutting him off forced him to grow up at 40. Better late than never. He's not asking for money or for things to go back to how they were. He just wanted me to know he finally understood. I told him I appreciated that. I didn't forgive him on the spot, didn't promise to rebuild our relationship immediately. But I didn't close the door either. We're both different people than we were 6 months ago. Maybe there's room for something new. The girlfriend, I need to call her my partner now because that's what she is. She's been my rock through all of this. She comes from a similar background, the responsible child in a family of chaos. She gets it in a way nobody else could. We've talked about marriage, about kids eventually, about building the life I always wanted but kept putting on hold while I funded everyone else's dreams. Update 3. It's been almost a year since that Thanksgiving dinner. I'm writing this final update because I think there's actual closure now, or as close as you get to closure with family. My brother has joint custody of his kids. He lives in a modest apartment, works his job, and pays his child support on time. We're not close, probably won't ever be the way brothers in movies are, but we're cordial. We can be in the same room without tension. His kids actually seem happier with the new arrangement, with a dad who's present instead of scheming his next big break. My parents and I have reached an understanding. I help occasionally with truly unexpected emergencies, medical things mostly, but it's on my terms. They ask instead of demanding. They express gratitude instead of expectation. We have dinner once a month, and nobody mentions my relationship status unless it's to ask genuine questions about my partner. Speaking of, I proposed. She said yes. We're getting married next spring, small ceremony, just people who actually matter. My parents are invited. My brother is invited. Whether they come or not is up to them, but the invitation is there. No hard feelings either way. The money I'm saving by not funding 3 other adults' lifestyles has gone toward our future. We've got a solid down payment ready for when we want to upgrade houses. We're planning a honeymoon in Europe, something I never let myself do before because there was always someone else who needed the money more. We're talking about kids in a few years, when we're ready, when we've built the foundation we want. Someone asked me recently if I regretted how it all went down, if I wished I'd handled it differently. I thought about it honestly and decided no. Could I have been more diplomatic? Probably. Could I have had a private conversation instead of a public confrontation? Sure. But would any of that have created the same catalyst for change? I don't think so. Sometimes you have to burn it down to build something better. My family needed to hit bottom to learn how to stand on their own. I needed to explode to learn how to set boundaries. We're all better for it now. Even if the path was ugly, the spreadsheet still exists. I look at it sometimes, not with anger anymore, but with a weird sort of gratitude. It's a record of who I used to be, someone who gave and gave and gave without ever asking what it cost me. I'm not that person anymore. I'm someone who knows his worth. Someone who expects respect. Someone who's building a life worth living instead of funding everyone else's attempts at the same. And honestly, my house isn't empty anymore. It's full of love and partnership and plans for the future. That's worth more than any amount of money I ever sent them. To anyone reading this who's in a similar situation, being the family ATM while getting nothing but grief in return, here's what I learned. You can't save people from themselves. You can't buy respect or love. And setting boundaries isn't cruel, even when people who benefited from your lack of boundaries tell you it is. Take care of yourself first. Build your own life. Let the people who mock you learn to stand on their own. You'd be surprised how capable they become when they don't have a choice. I'm good now. Actually good. And that's worth everything.